The Kenya Defence Forces, KDF, in Swahili, Majeshi ya Ulinzi ya Kenya, are the armed forces of the Republic of Kenya. They are made up of the Kenya Army, Kenya Navy, and Kenya Air Force. The current KDF was established in Article 241 of the 2010 Constitution of Kenya. It is governed by the KDF Act of 2012. Its main mission is the defense and protection of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Kenya. Recruitment to the KDF is done on yearly basis. The President of Kenya is the Commander-in-Chief of the KDF, and the Chief of Defense Forces is the highest-ranking military officer, and the principal military advisor to the President of Kenya. The KDF is regularly deployed in peacekeeping and warfighting missions, for example the counterinsurgency fight against Al-Shabaab in Somalia since 2011. Here is the brief history of KDF. The United Kingdom raised and maintained forces in Kenya colony after it was established, eventually to become the King's African Rifles, KAR. The KAR fought during the two world wars and in the Mau Mau uprising. On the other side of the Mau Mau uprising was the first Kenyan force raised by Africans themselves, the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. Let's look at KDF in various Kenyan government administrations. During Jomo Kenyatta administration, Kenya's independence on the midnight of December 12, 1963 was an enormous milestone. On independence, the Kenyan Parliament created the Kenya Military Forces, KMF, through the KMF Act 1963. Thus 3 KR, 5 KR, and 11 KR became 3 Kenya Rifles, 5 Kenya Rifles, and 11 Kenya Rifles respectively. The new independence government retained senior British military officers as advisors and trainers to the new Kenyan Army. They stayed on administering the former KR units as they developed more Kenyan characteristics. The Kenya Regiment composed of British settlers was disbanded. Between 1963 and 1967, Kenya fought the Shifta War against Somali residents who sought union with their kin in the Somali Republic to the northeast. In late 1963, 5th Kenya Rifles was sent to the northeastern province as a response to the growing number of Shifta ambushes. The Shifta were lightly loaded and very mobile, and could draw on substantial support from the local Kenyan Somali population. The army and police forcibly resettled the population into new villages and conducted sweeps to destroy the Shifta beyond, including making mortar attacks on assumed Shifta positions. On the evening of January 24, 1964, the failure of the Kenyan Prime Minister to appear on television, where 11th Kenya Rifles junior soldiers had been expecting a televised speech and hoping for a pay rise announcement, caused the men to mutiny. Parsons says it is possible that the speech was only broadcast on the radio in the Nakuru area where Lanet Barracks, home of the battalion, was located. Kenyatta's government held 2 separate courts-martial for 43 soldiers. This led to disbandment of the 11th Kenya Rifles. A new battalion, 1st Kenya Rifles, was created entirely from 340 Lanet soldiers who had been cleared of participation in the mutiny by the Kenyan Criminal Investigations Division, CID. All British troops would leave by December 12, 1964. The British would assist the army, resource and train a new Kenya Air Force, and create a new Kenya Navy. They would also provide RAF and army units to support internal security in the northeast. Significant military loans would be cancelled, then much military property made over to the Kenyan government. Army training deployments have continued up until 2015, as of 2015 supervised by British Army Training Unit Kenya. According to Timothy Parsons, Kenyatta did not have to worry about the political reliability of the Kenyan Army because expatriate senior British military advisors ran it along KR lines throughout the 1960s. Following the lessons of the Lanet Protects, African officers assumed operational command of all major units, but a British training team still oversaw the Kenyan Army for most of the decade. Within months of British Brigadier A.J. Hardy leaving the post of Commander Kenya Army and handing over to Brigadier Joseph Ndolo on December 1, 1966, British influence was underlined with the appointment of Major General Bernard Penfold as Chief of the Defence Staff, a new position as senior officer of the entire armed forces. Ndolo succeeded Penfold as Chief of Defense Staff in 1969 but was retired on June 24, 1971 after being implicated in a coup plot allegedly organized by Joseph Owino. The service chiefs thereafter reported directly to the Minister of Defense, James Gichuru. The post of Chief of the Defense Staff was only filled again 7 years later, renamed the Chief of the General Staff, CGS, when Daniel Arap Moi moved Lieutenant General Jackson Mulench from Army Commander to CGS in November 1978. Mahmoud Mohammed succeeded Mulench in 1986, and was CGS until 1996. Mohammed was succeeded by General Daudi Tanj, CGS 1996 to 2000. Women were first recruited into the armed forces in 1971 with the establishment of the Women's Service Corps. The corps was initially made up of 150 women under Major Patricia Ineson of the British Women's Royal Army Corps. During Moi's administration, the military, and also the police and GSU, had a monopoly of President Moi's ethnic group, the Kalenjin, in the top brass. Of 18 military generals, at least a third were Kalenjin. Of 20 brigadiers, 7 were Kalenjin according to South African Institute for Security Studies, an ethnic group that accounts for only a tenth of Kenya's population. From the 1990s the Kenya Army became involved in United Nations peacekeeping operations, which, Hornsby says, offered both experience and a source of income for the army and its soldiers. Kenya's first peacekeeping deployment was to the United Nations Iran-Iraq Military Observer Group to supervise the ceasefire, then UNTAG in Namibia. From 1989 to 2001, Kenyan troops took part in UNTAG, BANUSM, and PROFOR, UNCRO, Croatia, ANTAS, ANAMIL, and PRIDEP in Macedonia, 1996 to 1999, MONUA in Angola, 1997 to 1999, and UNTATE in East Timor, 1999 to 2001. In 1999 to 2000, women were integrated into the regular units of the military, and the Women's Service Corps disbanded. In the early 21st century, the Ministry of State for Defense, just like that of Internal Security and Provincial Administration, is part of the presidential machinery. All but senior military officers are appointed, promoted, and, if necessary, removed by the military's personnel system. The President appoints and retires senior military officers. Under the authority of the President as Commander-in-Chief, the Minister of Defense presides over the National Defense Council. The Chief of General Staff is the tactical, operational and administrative head of the military. During Kibaki administration, in the aftermath of the national elections of December 2007 and the violence that subsequently engulfed the country, the Commission of Inquiry, the Waki Commission, commended its readiness and adjudged it to have performed its duty well. Nevertheless, there have been serious allegations of human rights violations, most recently while conducting counterinsurgency operations in the MT Elgon area and also in the district of Mandera Central. In October 2011, following a weekend preparatory meeting between Kenyan and Somali military officials in the town of Dobeli, Kenya Army units crossed the border to begin Operation Linda Enchi, attacking the Al-Shabaab insurgents in southern Somalia. Kenya had coordinated with the transitional government in Mogadishu, and with the Somali militias in the border areas, but the drive on Kismayu was run by the KDF. In early June 2012, Kenyan forces were formally integrated into AMISOM. Subscribe, like and share to get more news about the KDF. Salute.